Welcome to the Wealth Renegade Podcast.
Butler.
That's me and our co-host.
Me. Oh, Ben Robinson.
We have a very special show today. We have my personal friend and longtime associate in the world of investing, Dane Larsen. Dane, welcome to the show.
Robby, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here today.
We are so glad to have you. So Dane works for Peak Prosperity, and the story of how we met is a pretty good one. Do you want to tell it, Dane?
I'd love to. I thought it definitely set up our relationship more or less. I mean, we were sitting at, was it Houston? Were we in Houston's airport?
Yes.
Yeah, we were in Houston's airport. I was reading a book by Robert Kiyosaki, his most recent book that came out on capitalism. And Robby and Ben were sitting across from me, and they recognized the book and asked if I was going to be at the summit here in beautiful Belize. And of course I was heading this way, and that's how we kicked things off, was over the book. And I can't be more grateful that they reached out and we've been able to connect.
Yeah. So where are we right now?
We are sitting in a room full of stuff in beautiful Belize, looking at the sunset right now. I don't know. It's picturesque, to say the least.
And why are we in Belize?
Yeah, it'd be the summit. Round 2.
Mm-hmm. Same time last year, we met at that investor summit, and gratefully we both came back, and I certainly hope we keep doing this for another couple dozen years at least, because I tell you, I don't think I've ever grown as quickly as I have as an investor in that one period last year. And now we're on day 2 of an incredible 21st annual investor summit on sand in Belize.
There's really no better opportunity to meet people of such a high caliber that are out there pounding pavement, putting things into work that they learn. There's no better atmosphere.
Absolutely. So tell us about the work you do.
Yeah, I'm a director of marketing and customer experience for Peak Prosperity. Peak Prosperity was started by the founder, Dr. Chris Martenson. Dr. Martwnson is a PhD, MBA. He is the most versatile guy I have ever met. We talk about things that get us banned on YouTube and Twitter, things that the global elites, let's say, wouldn't think too kindly of, and it gives a whole different meaning of work to me to help bring that information to the light, to help protect people, their assets, their livelihoods, their health, for what's coming down the pipe. And it really has been a huge impact on my life for the past year now almost.
You met Dr. Martenson at the first summit we attended, right?
Yeah, that's correct, I did.
And we got to hear him speak about, I think, at least 2 of the subjects that he is internationally known for: energy and the essential elements of prosperity. He's got a book that describes those elements. Can you give us a little summary of that book?
Yeah, he's got 2 books. There's a problem book called The Crash Course that was revised and edited, I want to say it's almost 5 months now, completely up to date with all new information. Recently hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list and has sold thousands and thousands of copies. We can't be more happy to get that out into the world, into people's hands. And then the second book, which you're alluding to, would be Prosper. Prosper is the solution-based book that talks about what you can do to help prepare yourself to continue to live a prosperous life and be able to continue your lifestyle in some degree if things get hairy in the economy, the energy markets, or the environment, because we're seeing all 3 of those beginning to crumble ever so quickly now.
So Dr. Martenson's expertise goes both economic and in the physical realm. We'll call it farming, energy, the necessary primary forms of wealth that we all need to further ourselves, to have control of the primary means of wealth creation and capital. So he's got such a multi-layered discipline to learning and then to teaching his wide audience. Do you know his backstory at all? How did he get to this point where he has such a broad view of the world around him and can teach so many people?
That's a great question. He started off in the corporate space. So like a lot of people, probably a lot of your listeners as well, they're in the corporate space and they aren't really that fulfilled. I mean, you're getting hounded each and every day by the man. You've got your stock portfolio, whatever that may be, at the grips of those that don't know what the heck they're doing, at the captain of the ship.
Yep.
And it wasn't until that early 2000s bumpy stock road where he saw his portfolio shredded that he kind of questioned it and paused and said, wait a second, what's the bigger reason here. I don't believe what they're telling us. And that's when he started diving in aggressively to the data, the information behind how the monetary system works, how energy relates to that, and it's all encompassed by the environment. So the 3 E's are what he teaches, and you even alluded to primary wealth, which has been a huge lesson in my journey with Chris, is understanding the 3 forms of wealth.
That's very cool. So you are now his director of marketing, helping to share his message with the world. Talk a little bit about that last year. What areas have been exciting for you in terms of growth, in terms of your new viewpoints on the world? What type of things stand out?
The thing that stands out most to me, and I'm so grateful and blessed to have had this opportunity, is to be able to look at peak prosperity in the business as a whole. So it's restructuring the branding, it's understanding what offers we can provide to clients that helps set them up for success. And being able to provide a package that is truly unique in a marketplace and giving people that opportunity to information that they can't find anywhere else. And it's so readily available, and it's, I want to say blatant, but it's not blatant, but it's put in such a concise manner by Chris and other contributors in our community that people feel connected, like they feel like they have an understanding of where things are going and how they can position themselves specifically in order to take advantage or preserve what they currently have.
Sure. So who is Chris's target audience?
Man, the golden question. That's exactly what I've been struggling with for the past couple months now.
Sure.
And I think it's, on a broader level, it's those willing and wanting to take action to better improve their lives, to become more self-sustaining, to where you don't have to rely on a supply chain. You don't have to rely on a government. You don't have to rely on a job. I mean, you're very passionate about that with just recently leaving your W-2 position, to where you can become self-sustaining, and the risk is on you. It's on your shoulders. It's on your ability to take action, fail fast, and learn.
Totally. And once you get that taste of self-sufficiency, I would almost describe it as compelling. You go, how can I do this in other areas? Which is where, for me, Chris's lessons exploded. He describes different forms of capital. You've got social capital, spiritual capital, economic capital,
Right.
we're familiar with. What are some of the other forms of capital?
Oh man, you have the emotional, you mentioned the spiritual, you have time capital, how do you utilize your time? You got living capital, that's soil, that's your health. And your health is so important. We saw that in 2020, 2021, 2022, and this year with the repercussions that have gone on from COVID and the medicines that were put in place. You've got your material capital, that's your structures, that's your bridges. You've got financial capital, of course, that's what we're here learning about in Belize. You've got your knowledge capital as well as social capital. Both of those are what we're also learning here in Belize. I mean, you're able to meet so many people that share the same mission and values and can exchange what they've learned in their decades of experience, both of which are extremely important. I would even argue social capital is the most important form of capital compared to what often people think financial is. But what we've learned, and you can even speak to this with what we learned yesterday about how financial capital can change. It really can. It can vary, it can be diluted, it can be devalued. So you have to diversify amongst other forms of capital.
Totally. And if you only had financial capital, anyone would recognize you are in such a narrow view of what life can be. What a sad state that would be. Rich and no friends. We've all heard those stories, but equally, rich and no health.
Oh,
rich,
man.
Rich and no knowledge. That's a sad story too. I mean, no better person to take advantage of. You know, the next person to call someone and say, "Oh, you know, I'm unfortunately the Nigerian prince. Please send me some
Right.
money." That's rich and no knowledge, and that person is susceptible to the evils out in the world.
God, so true.
How have you changed your individual approach to life since kind of learning with Chris and taking part in his homesteading, in his farming, in his community? Have you changed your own actions?
My own actions have changed more so from perspective and beliefs. My beliefs have completely shifted. When you and I met last year in Houston, I had the goal of trying to purchase as many property as I possibly could in a short time frame. Since then, it's completely pivoted to how many skills can I build and develop in an even more compressed time frame that allows me to expand my ability to seize opportunities as they arise. Because we've been in a cycle for the past 10 to 20 years where it's been up, up, and up. There's been what I believe to be fake opportunities to where people have been saved by the markets constantly going up. But when things turn, it's not whether or not you have money, it's whether or not you have the skills and the connections to seize on those opportunities. And that's really where I want to position myself, is to be able to take advantage of those opportunities where money isn't really an issue. It's how creative can you get to put that deal together.
Totally. So you've almost elevated your viewpoint beyond just accumulation of one form of capital to how can you essentially become the Swiss Army knife that can be solution oriented going forward. And
certainly,
where does that take you in the future? Where do you want to take those new skills?
I think that's the beauty of it. I have no idea. I have zero clue where this is going to lead me. I had no idea I would have the opportunity that I have today from the Investor Summit last year.
Sure.
But it's making sure that I am open-minded. I don't stick to my beliefs. They're my beliefs because they are temporary and malleable. So if I'm able to hold beliefs that can be changed at a moment's notice when new data is taken in, then I'm able to quickly adjust at a pace that's certainly going to be faster than our peers. And we've been able to see that. I mean, with the amount of people you talk to on a day-to-day basis about investing, trying to get people out of that stock market that, oh man, it's a dangerous game that people don't have control over, and into properties on Main Street.
It is such a change in perspective for some people, and I'm sure were they to start following Chris Martenson, they would be suddenly amazed at the amount of data he consumes and the advice and guidance and information he presents. So if someone is, let's call them, just waking up to some of the info out there that is more difficult to obtain until you know the right people, how would you recommend they go about that journey? How does that go for someone?
Well, and being in a similar position just 12 months ago, it's baby steps, like anything. You know, you didn't pop out of the womb sprinting and doing a 4K. You took a baby step, you crawled first before you could walk. And I think that's the same thing with building resilience. You have to understand where your exposure is. Are you extremely exposed to the stock market? Are you completely reliant upon a supply chain for food? Are you completely reliant upon your vehicle to get from point A to point B in order to sustain your quality of life? And then working it backwards from there to know where you need to build up in your life that meets your current values and missions. So for me, it was financial. I needed to get financially resilient. So what was that? That was making sure my property is fixed up, that something big isn't going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, knock on wood, as well as taking cash out of the bank, because like we've learned yesterday, banks are not stable. You're loaning your money to the bank to do as it pleases. So if you take cash out of the bank, keep it in a safe, bury it in a hole in the backyard for all I care, anything besides the bank is going to be beneficial. So taking those small steps, where it could just be taking cash out of the bank, will lead to other steps later on down the road as you begin to move and work your way through building a more resilient life.
So is there a clear goal of resilience? How do you reach a point of stability with resilience, or do you?
This is a great question. It's something that I've really pondered quite a bit, especially when talking to our members and hearing their stories as well of people that have been doing this for decades. It seems as though it doesn't end, but it transforms. And what do I mean by transform? Transform in that they pick up interests. There was a gentleman that I spoke to who was concerned about communicating with his children. I want to say he lived in Ohio and they were just south of him, 200 miles or so. And he was concerned with it. And he was looking into ham radio services. So in case communication goes down with cell phones and other various forms of communication, they can still communicate via ham radio. And it completely opened up a whole new world that's developed into a hobby for him around ham radio. But he would have never known that if he hadn't taken that first little step in learning about it to see if it could benefit him and his family for what they needed. And they valued communication. He wants to make sure that his children are going to be okay in case something does happen. And they're completely resilient outside of our current communication path, which I don't have. I don't have it. I'm completely relying on my cell phone. If cell towers go down, we've been having issues back home of cell service. My friends can't even get service in downtown Bellingham where they used to be able to. Now that's, for whatever reason, changed. I don't know the reasoning behind that, but all this stuff is so new in human history. We've only had it for a couple decades, right? It's not
so true.
It hasn't been hundreds and hundreds of years like people want to make it think or seem as such.
And a huge error is assuming that the status quo will continue. So maybe the largest mistake you can make is to assume this is the new normal concept. Right. This is the new normal, and this is how it will stay. Or we're trying to return to some place of stability. The only constant truly is change. And the way to make that positive transformational change is by being open-minded to figuring out what do you need to do in this new context with these new concepts you're learning. Just like you said, little baby steps. Open the eyes. Take a first little step, test the waters, and see what a new viewpoint brings to you.
That's spot on. It's what you mentioned there reminds me of the financial disclosure. Past performance does not indicate future.
Right.
So you can't base the past performance on what could happen in the future. It certainly is unknown. You have some idea, right? There's a lot of scenarios out there, but you aren't exactly sure, and that's where you have to hedge your bets and think in terms of bets, like Annie Duke wrote in her great book about how you need to think in percentages instead of black and white. There's a whole lot of gray, not a lot of black and white.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a great little nugget too. So where do we go to keep up with you, to keep up with Dr. Martenson? How do people who want to learn more follow along and be a part of Dr. Martenson's community?
Yeah, peakprosperity.com. Again, that's peakprosperity.com is our community platform, our website. That's where you can follow all the content. You can also find us at Peak Prosperity on YouTube. Dr. Martenson also is on Twitter at Dr. Martenson. And if you want to connect with me, I'm most active on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Dane, like the dog, Larsen, Larsen. Always happy to chat with anyone that's interested.
So that's how we keep up with Dr. Martenson and with your work as a core member of his community. To shift conversations a little bit, tell me from this new perspective you have with all of this data that you and Dr. Martenson parse through and sift through, what do you think about big world stage ideas? Like, as an example, what we're hearing China do with the deals they're striking up. How do you view that with your new perspective?
It makes complete sense to me. It really does. They have been playing a century-long game. I think that's what's so fascinating with them is us as Americans think so short-term. We're so gratitude-focused. I believe that's why we've had such a almost a revolution of short-form content, TikTok, Netflix, Starbucks. You need it now and you need it quick. China, they're in the long game, man. They are striking deals around the world for things that actually matter, that primary wealth, the oil, the energy, the food, the water, the gold, military, relationships, all of it. What are we focused on? We're focused on
entertainment, instant gratification.
That's really what it is. I mean, such surface level stuff compared to what actually matters that they're completely taken over.
So, as an individual, because none of us have an international political seat or geopolitical seat, what do we do to ensure that at the very least we remain focused on what actually matters?
I think you could even copy them in a small scale. I mean, you see them buying up mass amounts of precious metals, the silver, the gold. What does that tell you? That tells you that they themselves do not trust the currency and power being the US dollar. So if a country of China's size and stature doesn't trust the world reserve currency, why should I? What makes me better or different than a large nation, you know? I mean, it's my livelihood too. How can I preserve it and position myself to not only survive, but also thrive with whatever's happening down the road? Because there's more of them, they're much wiser, they're much more experienced than I myself.
So we're watching these machinations go on in the big world stage. What about the nations' partnerships that we are hearing? You talked about alliances as being a key feature of some of the things. How do you view, for example, the BRICS nations getting together? And what do you think is stimulating that kind of activity?
That kind of activity, I believe, is stimulated by understanding the energy story that we're in. I mean, Robby, you and I chatted about this extensively last night, how the oil space is chalking up to not be as rich and plentiful as it once was. We're living on oil from 100 years ago, and we're not getting the same net returns that we are today. And they recognize that, but we don't, which is really kind of a interesting standpoint with what the United States has done in regards to the strategic petroleum reserve, and with it being so depleted during I want to say it was the midterms, that they haven't begun to do anything with it. They've just kept it low while you have, like you mentioned, China going out and striking up deals across the Middle East, South America, and really positioning themselves to be the head of the table when it comes to energy. So I am pickled on how that's going to affect you and I, as well as the United States. I think it was the quote that you mentioned yesterday that Russ talked about, Russ Gray, how when international nations don't want the US dollar, that causes domestic inflation.
Therefore, domestic pain.
Right?
Yep.
Especially for those not in real assets.
Especially there. And so inconveniently, an inconvenient truth almost, that the majority of the financial advice for the last 50 years has pushed people into the very thing that will do so much damage. Do you think there is cohesion to that? Do you think there is intentionality to the primed up United States population, which is about to get hit with the hammer of this dramatic shift in currency and economics?
I believe it goes right back to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt quote, President FDR, I'm going to butcher it right now, but he says nothing in politics happens as a coincidence. There's always a reasoning behind it. So with everything that's been going on, I believe there's a reason. I think that what that reason is less important than where we're currently at. And you don't have to you shouldn't get caught up in the reasoning. I mean, it is what it is. This is the cards that were dealt. You have to understand what's going on. Don't shoot the messenger. I mean, what you and I are talking about right now is just simply details. You can go do an internet search and find this stuff. You might have to dig a little bit. Maybe you go on Brave browser instead of Google. But you do have to dig a little bit to find what's going on in this world. You can also visit Peak. I know Chris talks about that heavily. But you have to see what's going on and stop dwelling on what's happening and the reasonings behind that, because man, you will get caught up in an emotional roller coaster that doesn't end. It won't end. So you have to take that with a large grain of salt, move on, begin taking massive intentional action.
That's a great thought to end on, because at the end of the day, it really is your life. The choice between good and evil, productivity and consumption, inspiration or degradation, or whatever the opposite is that people so often choose. We can choose to be incredible agents for intentional good in the world, or we can cop out. And there is a moment, the classic Ayn Rand book, Atlas Shrugged. It's the thought that with the pressure of the whole world, you shrug. You say, all right, your loss, I'm going to proceed forward independently. And yet, like what Chris talks about with social capital, this great all-encompassing thought of, if there's something you can do for your fellow man while they are still able to have something done for them, you should do it. Because then you've got your tribe.
Yep, that's spot on. And it's so important to have your tribe. We have our tribe here. You can feel it.
Oh yeah.
People are there for you. You've seen it firsthand with those willing to help.
Totally. And to have more people willing to help creates essentially the bedrock. That's the real essence of a community. Isn't that what we'd all want?
I'd certainly love that.
Yeah. Dane, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Robby, pleasure.